discussion. We will be discussing the concerning issue over the lack of funding here in the Central Valley. I am Joyce Asombrado. This is Gitika. This is Caitlin, and that's Alondra. Caitlin will now introduce you into the subject.
So I decided to start my portion of the panel discussion with a story about a girl named Jamaria Miller. She constantly found herself running to her classroom in William Penn School District, not to find a good seat or to be there on time like most of us would assume. She was running to get a good blanket. Her cold classroom with non-insulated walls was a constant distraction for her, but her school didn't have the money to innovate them. We're going to tell you a little bit more today about poor funding for schools in the U.S., specifically in the Central Valley, and the effects it has on students' quality of learning. Even though students are only a small portion of our population, they're 100% of our future. It affects all of us, and it's really important to know how underfunded schools in our community are affecting us personally or will be in the near future. We're going to discuss magnitude of the problem, who's impacted, the cost of the problem, why it exists, and what's stopping us from fixing it.
As Caitlin has discussed the introduction, she will now get into the magnitude of the issue. First, we must question ourselves, how is this affecting us today?
So the severity of this issue is major and has a significant impact on the lives of the students it affects. Throughout the U.S., it's a common trend of low-income schools being underfunded, and it is typically these students that need additional support that are the first to lose the money. So you can see that this is the average annual budget per student in each of the states, and California is in the bottom 5. So we're really struggling to hold on to our funding there, which is unfortunate. And according to an article written by Chandra Villanueva in 2017, more funding equals smaller class sizes, more engaging learning programs, and better bilingual support, resulting in a much more productive learning environment. However, schools in low-income districts often have overworked teachers and staff and often overburdened, causing lower and lower test scores each year. Central Valley itself is impacted a lot by lack of funding in the public schools, which is leading to negative effects on our local community. Schools in the Central Valley have notably lower graduation rate than the rest of the schools in California. A recent study finds the Fresno Unified School District labeled among the most economically segregated in the country, leaving only $1,585 per student. That's compared to the Clovis Unified School District at $3,190 and the Golden Valley District at $3,660, both over double what Fresno Unified students are receiving.
I just want to add to what Caitlin has said. During my psychology class, my professor discussed the impact of how one's environment affects the way a student learns. So as you can see in the Central Valley, there's a big issue of poverty, and many students in those areas struggle academically, not because of themselves, but because of the lack of resources and the lack of funding provided to those schools. So they're not able to gain the opportunities that, let's say, people up in the Bay Area or in urban areas are receiving. To transition, I will be informing you on the barriers that have surfaced regarding this issue. So, barriers that prevent rural communities from receiving funds is based upon legal aid programs here in California. There are about 11 programs here in California. In Nancy Villarreal's journal, Improving Legal Aid to Rural Communities in California, in 2009, she states the Legal Services Corporation, otherwise known as the LCS, provides funding to 11 legal aid programs here in California. The LCS provides funding through the form of grants to the school districts here in California. However, although the LCS grants funding to each individual equally who are in poverty. The lack of, or the population here in the Central Valley is very sparse compared to urban areas. Therefore, we're not, the Central Valley itself isn't receiving a lot of funding from the LCS, although they really need it. Therefore, the formula that the LCS is using needs to be strengthened in order to dominate this issue. Because, as I said, like sparsely populated areas equal lesser funds from the LCS. The California Commission on Access of Justice has recognized this issue within the LCS formula. Therefore, the commission suggests that the baseline of attorneys per county be raised. The baseline for attorneys per county would open up the ability for people to have access to legal services in order to help their situation financially. And although there is financial need in urban areas, there are, again, more population. There's more population in urban areas compared to the rural community. Therefore, a lot of the attorneys in urban areas will usually do pro bono or low bono cases for people who have financial need. Whereas in the rural area, people aren't able to access these needs. Now that I informed you on the barriers that regard this issue, Geetika will discuss the logistics and how the issue impacts rural and low-income communities who face the issue firsthand.
Okay, so on average, it costs about $10,615 to send a kid to public school for a year. So where does that money come from? Well, according to an article written by Margaret Veston in 2011, public schools receive their funding by three main sources: state, federal, and property taxes and other resources. So public schools receive 57% of their school funding through the state, so therefore they rely highly on the states. And the second source public schools rely on is their own property taxes, and because it's 29% of the fundings, so if the schools are in help and they're in like poverty level, that source is like basically helpless because they don't have enough money. And lastly, public schools receive 14% of their fundings from federal government, making it less reliable of a source compared to the other two.
As you are now informed of the issue and how it affects people here in the community, Alondra will now discuss and inform you all on how much and where schools receive their funding.
As Joyce mentioned, a lot of the populations that are being impacted because of this issue are rural and low-income communities. And an article written by Rating Batch in 2014 states that 60% of California citizens lived in poverty and 22% of children lived in families with incomes lower than the poverty state of California in the year 2013. The Central Valley is actually one of the highest percentages of poverty in California. So as you can see from the map above, our communities like Fresno, Tulare, Kern, Keene, and Madera have one of the highest percentages in the state of California. So we are very much being impacted due to this problem. Another article written by Baron Matcher in 2014 states that it is shown that the majority of low-income populations in the Central Valley are made up of Hispanic migrant laborers and English learners. We are the Central Valley is pretty much known for its agriculture, so because of the agriculture, a lot of foreign workers are being attracted to this type of like labor, because this labor doesn't really require a lot of education or any experience at all. And because many people work in these types of jobs, this is one of the biggest reasons why we are in such poverty, because these jobs they really aren't paid well. So a lot of these people are being paid with poverty level wages.
Now that you know how public schools receive their funding, I will inform you, you all on how the lack of funds have affected the students here in the Central Valley. Due to the lack of funding, STEM education has been hindered towards students in the Central Valley. Kirk Brown, Director of STEM Education in the San Joaquin Valley, who's mentioned in Caroline Jones's article, Rural Schools Find Ways to Bring Science Innovations Closer to Home, written April 24, 2018. He states that Central Valley students do not receive the same opportunities opposed to their peers living in urban areas. Due to the lack of science innovations here in the Central Valley, county offices of education here in the Central Valley are trying their hardest to invest in engineering labs, science camps, mobile classrooms, and other initiatives to help rural students compete with their urban counterparts. Although some county offices are trying to battle this issue of poverty and its effects towards students here in the Central Valley, the main issue is that these school districts aren't getting enough funding. Therefore, they can't invest in these innovations and materials needed to educate their students effectively. In the San Joaquin County Office of Education, they've received $1 million for their fabrication lab. I don't know if anyone here is from the San Joaquin Valley. Anyone? The lab is located in Stockton, which schools have now utilized this source for to educate their students through field trips and exposing their students to modern technologies such as laser cutters, 3D printing, and new software that the students are intrigued by. Through this investment, a great step, through this investment, the education in the San Joaquin Valley has improved. However, other rural areas do not have this luxury. Statewide, students who live in small towns and rural areas were found to score significantly lower in standardized tests that were conducted by the state of California. In California, in 2015, California set out a new standard called the Next Generation Science Standards. Therefore, California initiated a new standardized test that tested the students' capability in terms of science. In urban areas, students in urban areas were found to score above proficient level, which was about 58%, whereas those in rural communities were found to score 51%. Because of the lack of science facilities, those in rural areas are unable to unable to have this access to further improve their ability to absorb new science information. In addition, professors and teachers are unable to access professional learning and conferences that are needed to teach their students the new standards in California. Now, Alondra will now discuss the ways in which the community can fight the issue of funding.
I'll go ahead and add to that. How the community can help get support and fundings for the local and public schools is community members and the parents can get more involved with their public schools and like go to the district meetings so that they know when the school needs more fundings or how the school's spending money to get the students' education, and just be more involved with school so that you know what's going on, and that's the one thing that can help the funds and support overall.
In conclusion, poor public school funding is not only an issue in the Central Valley, but can also be an issue across the United States. It is important that we realize that something needs to be done because these students are our future and these students need to be prepared for it.